If you listen to modern pop, hip-hop, electronic music, or really any new movie score, I can guarantee you're hearing an instrument that doesn't use strings or wood, it doesn't use hammers, it's the sound of raw electricity.
It really is.
And today, we are diving deep into that sound, the synthesizer, that box of circuits and keys that has completely redefined what music even is for the last 60 years.
It's so much more than just an instrument. It's a machine that lets musicians basically grab the laws of sound and bend them.
Right.
So we're going to trace its journey from, these massive room-filling lab machines to becoming the single most important tool in global pop music.
Okay, let's unpack this. What are we even talking about when we say synthesizer?
At its core, a synthesizer is an electronic instrument, so it doesn't create sound acoustically like a guitar or a drum.
No moving parts, really.
Exactly. Instead, it uses electricity to create vibrations, and it relies on these internal parts called oscillators.
And when this whole thing started, it was anything but portable.
Oh, not at all. You have to picture like a 1940s science lab. The very first synths were enormous. They used these delicate vacuum tubes, complex wiring.
Yeah.
They took up entire walls
Just to make a sound.
just to produce a single, simple, and often pretty unstable tone. And they weren't for music. They were for engineering research.
So how do we get from a giant temperamental machine in a lab to something that fits on a stage or, on my laptop? Who shrunk the future?
That's where Robert Moog comes in. Moog figured out how to make all that circuitry smaller, more stable, and this is the key, controllable.
Controllable how?
With voltage. He invented something called the voltage-controlled oscillator, or VCO. And that meant musicians can use an electrical current to instantly change things like pitch and volume.
And that's the leap.
That's the leap from the lab to the performance.
Okay, before we get into the bands of the music, let's nail down the science here. You said the synth generates sound by controlling vibrations. What does that actually mean?
Well, all sound is just a vibration traveling through the air as a wave. Every single sound is defined by the shape of that wave, and synthesizers are masters at shaping them.
Okay.
We can start with the most basic one, the sine wave. It's perfectly smooth, perfectly clean. It produces a really pure, almost whistle-like tone.
Very gentle.
Very gentle. But if you start bending that wave into a sharp, jagged pattern, like a square wave, you introduce all this other energy.
I know that sound.
You do. A square wave is much buzzier, kind of harsh. If you've ever heard old video game music or a really powerful bass line in a dance track, you're hearing a square wave.
So those basic shapes, the sine, the square, sawtooth, they're like the primary colors of sound for a synthesizer.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's like being given 4 types of clay to sculpt any noise you can imagine.
And the properties of those waves determine everything we hear, musically speaking.
Absolutely. 2 key measurements. First, the height of the wave. That determines the loudness, which we measure in decibels.
Taller wave, louder sound.
Simple as that. Second, the speed of the vibration. That's the pitch, how high or low the note is. And we measure that in hertz. Faster wave, higher note.
So the musician is just shaping the wave, setting its height and speed, maybe layering a few shapes together until it sounds like a trumpet or a spaceship.
Precisely. And in Moog's world, there was one more tool that was just as important. The voltage-controlled filter, the VCF.
Okay, a filter, what does that do?
Think of it like a sonic curtain. It lets you dynamically cut off the harsh, high frequencies, those buzzy square waves.
Yeah.
When you hear that classic Moog sound, that sweeping, squelching noise,
Yeah.
that's the filter opening and closing. It gives the sound movement and warmth. And that's what made musicians in the late 60s realize, oh, this isn't just a science toy. This is a real instrument.
And once Moog made the synthesizer playable, it immediately got the attention of the biggest bands in the world. Beatles used one on Abbey Road in 1969.
And everyone wanted to know what that new, strange noise was. Before that, electronic sounds were, well, they were for sci-fi B movies, eerie background effects.
Right.
But rock and jazz artists grabbed the Moog and brought that futuristic sound right into pop music.
Now, those early Moogs had this hilarious limitation that I think most people today wouldn't even believe. They used a piano keyboard, so they were playable, but they were almost all monophonic.
Which means they could only play one note at a time.
One single note.
A massive pain point. If you wanted to play a simple 3-note chord of harmony, you couldn't just press 3 keys.
What did you do?
You had to record the first note, then play back the tape and record the second note over it, and then the third. It was so time-consuming.
It sounds impossible. Why did anyone even bother if it was that expensive and that difficult to use?
What's fascinating here is that Even with all those limits, heavy, expensive, one note at a time, the Moog proved that an electronic instrument could be incredibly expressive.
It was worth the effort.
It was worth the effort. It showed that electronic sounds could carry the emotion of a song, not just be a weird effect in the background. And that just kicked the door wide open.
And that experimentation in the late 60s and 70s, it turned into a full-blown musical earthquake by the 1980s, the synth pop explosion.
It was a total takeover.
Yeah.
Suddenly, in places like London and New York, musicians started replacing the traditional rock band setup guitars, acoustic drums, with all electronic gear.
And the technology was getting cheaper.
Much cheaper and smaller.
Yeah.
And it created this clean, modern, slightly robotic feeling that it defined the entire decade of the 80s.
That look totally matched the sound, too, didn't it? The futuristic costumes, the high-tech vibe.
It was a revolution that started in bedrooms. That's the other key part. You didn't need a huge, expensive recording studio anymore. A teenager could buy a synth and a drum machine and make a professional-sounding track all by themselves.
And a huge part of that 80s sound came from a very specific type of synthesizer, the drum machine.
The drum machine is exactly what it sounds like, a synth just for making percussion sounds and rhythms. The early ones sounded really artificial, not like real drums at all.
But musicians loved that.
They loved the precision. It gave you a mathematically perfect, steady beat every single time.
And if we're talking drum machines, we have to talk about the undisputed king.
Oh, absolutely. The Roland TR-808. It's one of the most culturally important instruments ever built.
It came out in 1980, right? And it was kind of a flop at first.
It was. It was a commercial failure because it didn't sound like real drums. But that's exactly what made it revolutionary. Its signature sound is that kick drum. It has this deep, booming bass that just lasts longer than a real drum.
That's the sound you feel in your chest.
Exactly. And that one sound became the literal foundation of early hip-hop and electronic dance music all over the world.
So this one machine, a commercial failure, basically defined the beat for 80s pop, for modern trap, for house music.
Yeah.
That's an incredible crossover.
It really is. And today, the sounds of the 808, even though they're mostly digital samples now, are still in almost every hit song you hear. It's the ghost in the machine that's still driving the beat.
Okay, so moving from the history a bit. When you look at how synths actually make sound, you hear about two big families, analog and digital.
Right, and they're two completely different philosophies. Analog is the old school. It uses physical circuits and changing voltage to create the sound waves.
And because it's physical, there are always these little imperfections, right? That's why people say analog sounds warm.
Exactly right. That tiny fluctuation is called harmonic distortion, and it adds this richness. It sounds organic, a little imperfect, and human. A lot of musicians still prefer it for that reason.
And then the microchip changed everything, which brings us to digital.
Digital synths use computer chips and mathematical formulas algorithms to generate sound. They're way more reliable. They can store thousands of sounds, and they can replicate real instruments like a whole orchestra with incredible accuracy.
And now we have software versions of these.
Yep, soft synths, which run entirely on a computer. Most producers today use a blend of both the warmth of analog gear with the flexibility of digital software.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. You've got an old analog Moog, a Roland drum machine, a new computer with a soft synth. How do they all talk to each other?
That is the MIDI revolution. MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It was standardized in the early 80s, and it is the invisible backbone of all modern music.
And this is the part that is so crucial to understand. MIDI does not transmit audio. It doesn't send the sound.
Correct. That's the most common misunderstanding. It only transmits data, pure instructions. It's like sheet music for computers.
So it just says.
It says which note to play, when to play it, and how hard to play it. That's it.
So if I record a piano melody using MIDI, and then I decide I want it to be a huge, aggressive bass line instead, I don't have to re-record it.
Nope. You just click one button to change the instrument. The instructions, the MIDI data stay exactly the same. That flexibility changed everything.
The power of digital technology also opened up another huge creative door, especially with sampling.
Sampling is just taking a small piece of an existing recording, a drum beat, a vocal, any noise, and reusing it in a new song.
But it's more than just copying and pasting, right?
Oh, yeah. Samplers let you chunk that sound up, stretch it out, change its pitch. You can turn it into something completely unrecognizable.
Suddenly, the entire world becomes your sound library.
For sure. A producer might record the sound of shattering glass, warp it, and turn it into a hi-hat cymbal, or take a door slam, pitch it way down, and make it into a heavy bass note. This technique just exploded in the 90s with hip-hop and house music.
And that ability to create atmosphere with sound wasn't just for pop music, it totally transformed movies, too.
Filmmakers realized very quickly that electronic textures could instantly create a mood. If you need tension or dread or a sense of, cold alien wonder,
Hmm.
a deep pulsing synth is way more effective than a flute.
And let's be honest, it was also a lot cheaper.
It was dramatically cheaper than hiring a 60-piece orchestra for your film score, especially in the 80s. That's why so many classic sci-fi and horror movies have those iconic, moody synth scores.
It's like a cinematic shorthand. You hear those sounds, your brain immediately goes to future or danger.
Exactly.
Looking at the world today, synths are more accessible than they have ever been. We mentioned the soft synths. They run on laptops, tablets, even phones now.
Which is huge.
Mm.
It means that you as a student can have $1 million studio worth of sound-making power inside your backpack. The cost to get started as a music producer has basically vanished.
And portability is everything. You have these little battery-powered synths now. You can make music in a park, on a bus, anywhere.
And all that accessibility has fueled this massive global culture. You think of these huge electronic music festivals, that entire world, the DJs, the light shows, all of it is built on the synthesizer. It's where art, math, and computer science all smash together.
And it's not stopping. The future is unfolding right now. We're already seeing artificial intelligence helping to generate melodies and create unique sound textures that would take a human hours to design.
We're going to see new interfaces too. Instruments that don't even have keys, that maybe turn brainwaves or hand gestures into music. It's critical to realize that a 13-year-old today has more powerful musical technology at their fingertips than the biggest rock stars of the 1960s ever did.
So what does this all mean? The synthesizer started as this complex, room-sized lab machine, and through innovation, it's become the most versatile and accessible tool for creating entire new musical worlds.
And its history isn't over. The next chapter is going to be written by the generation that has these tools in their hands right now.
Good luck with your studies.